One question I've gotten a handful of times is, should I apply for a job I'm underqualified for? In this video, I'll explain when you absolutely should apply and when it just might not be as appropriate. So stay tuned. Hey folks, Richard Walls here, helping you with career development and personal finance. And if those two topics are topics that are of interest to you, I'd highly recommend subscribing to the channel down below and hitting the notification bell so you get notified of when I post new content. And of course, if you happen to like what you're seeing, it would help out my channel quite a bit if you also hit that like button down below. So with that said, let's get to it. Having worked with a handful of folks in job searches, it's very common, of course, to see job listings that have a list of requirements that they have of the prospective candidate that list type of work experience as well as years of work experience and possibly even education. It's also quite common for people to take a look at the list of their requirements and assume that if they don't meet every single one of the requirements, then they will never be considered for the role. Here's what you need to know about job postings. In many cases, job postings and the list of requirements that they have, it's directionally correct. It's the ballpark of what they're looking for. In some ways, it's a bit of a wish list, and the hiring manager will know that they're likely going to get a good amount of applicants that may meet most of the requirements, but not every single one of the requirements. However, if they do happen to get applicants that meet all the requirements, then that's also great too. So this is all to say that it's very unlikely that they're going to discard any application that doesn't meet every single one of the requirements fully. Now, one element of a job posting that may or may not be mentioned is the priority that that particular role has for certain requirements. Sometimes it may be listed, sometimes it may say this particular skill is absolutely required and you absolutely need to have X amount of years of experience, but in many cases it'll be more or less a laundry list of different requirements. So you don't exactly know which ones are of the highest priority, and you can probably guess more or less what they are based on the job posting and the job description. But again, this is to say that when you look at it, it's not so much about meeting every single one of the requirements 100%. It's more about understanding the experiences and skills that you bring to the table and how well that fits with the job description and the requirements that are listed. So with that, I'll walk through some examples of when you should apply and also some examples where maybe you shouldn't apply. And I'll start with years of experience because that tends to be a pretty popular one in terms of the questions that I've received. And as an example, if there's a job listing that requires 10 years of experience, and let's say maybe you have 7, I would consider that fair game. 7 years of experience is really not that far off the mark from 10 years, and I would say 7 years is a good amount of experience, and it's not that dramatically different from 10 years. Now, it's a different story if you have 1 to 2 years of experience. Maybe you're very junior in your career. That's going to be quite a bit of a leap, and in that case, I wouldn't really look into that role. Another example is, let's say you've been in sales at a company and you're looking into another position, also sales, but in a different industry that you might not have had experience in before. In that case, I would still consider applying, assuming that you are very interested in that industry. And I would also consider looking at maybe inexpensive credentials you can go pursue or coursework you can do to bolster your case and add to the story that you're trying to tell that you are interested in this industry. But having that sales experience, I would consider that to be of utmost importance. Now, I will caveat that with the following. And that is, it really also depends on the sales role you're applying for. It depends on if that sales role or that particular position is dealing with very important accounts for that company. And with that, that company is certainly going to want someone that has plenty of experience in this industry, if not someone within their own company, to handle some of those critical key accounts. So that might be more difficult for a salesperson if they're coming from technology, for example, going into oil and gas. That's going to be a pretty big leap. But if you're starting out at a possibly lower position or lower in the totem pole of the sales organization, there you have some opportunity. But all this is to say is that sales is a really great skill to have, and it's transferable to a lot of different industries. Of course, there's still other considerations you have to make for what those requirements are. But again, have some confidence when applying to a role in an industry or company you're very interested in. On the other hand, let's say you're going into a role that you don't have any skill set in. Let's say you're going from being an accountant to someone in marketing, to a marketing role. That's going to be a bit of a leap. Those are two very different skill sets in most ways. So that's maybe a role I wouldn't go for, at least for the time being. I would certainly look into getting some credentials or some kind of education that of course can fill in some of the gaps for you. I think coming from accounting, as an example, does bring some really valuable skill sets. You're very detail oriented as an accountant, so that's obviously helpful when it comes to marketing, but there's a lot of other skills that have to be supplemented, and that's where education, that's where credentials may be of value, so that if you are interested in that role, there you may have an opportunity. Bottom line is this: whatever role you apply for should be related in some form or fashion to the experiences you've had in the past or the skill sets you've acquired. And it's up to you to craft a message and tailor the story specific to that role and perhaps even that company, because there may be certain experiences or skill sets you want to emphasize more to give you the best opportunity to be reviewed as a candidate. So I really urge everyone, if there's a role that you are legitimately interested in pursuing, and if your qualifications, if your experiences and skill sets are in the ballpark of what the job calls for, then that's something you should absolutely pursue. The worst thing that can happen if you apply is that you receive nothing. You don't get a call back, nothing happens. That's the worst thing that happens. But if you don't apply, the worst thing that can happen is that you could have missed an opportunity in which, if you would have applied, you possibly could have gotten an interview and you possibly could have landed that opportunity, which is infinitely worse than not having applied in the first place. Folks, those are my 2 cents on this subject. Let me know down in the comments below what your thoughts are, and more importantly, if you've ever applied for a job in which you were underqualified, quote unquote, or maybe not fully qualified, and you ended up getting the job and succeeding anyway. I'd certainly love to hear those stories as well, so leave a note down below. With that said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you around.